Hello, my name is Jordanka Tomkova. I am from the EGAP program. It's an e-governance for accountability and participation program that is a Ukrainian and Swiss collaboration. And I'm here to tell you today about some practical aspects of how to design a good e-democracy project. I would like to, in my session, answer 3 questions. The first questions will be, what typically financing institutions look for? I mean, this could be government, this could be donors, this could be private sector. I cannot speak specifically on all of them because many times they have specific demands, but there are some general trends of what, or characteristics of what is a good e-democracy project. So that's my first question. What financing institutions typically look for? The second question is what makes a good project, and particularly e-democracy project. It's a question of design and planning and some project management cycle issues, as well as I would like to bring up some common mistakes that e-democracy projects tend to fall into, so that you can, when you are designing your project, you can avoid them. And lastly, maybe what are some of your options? Where to look for fundraising opportunities? So these are 3 things I would like to raise. So starting first, what the institutions or funding institutions look for. There are probably 5 key areas that I would advise any projects to stick by, where a financing institution is looking at the big picture of a project. Not only about the solution, but about the big picture of the project, what it will deliver. Now, the first, let's say, criteria is its relevance. How relevant is a project for the current state of, let's say, democracy or e-democracy in Ukraine? And the relevance could be looking at what has been done before, what exists already, so that there's no duplication, and maybe what relevance has it for future, and how is it addressing current issues and current maybe solutions or problems and solutions to problems that are currently happening in a particular society or setting or context. So relevance is number 1. The second thing we look at, how effective or potential for effectiveness does the project have? And effectiveness is how is the project designed in order to fulfill the objectives it sets for itself? The third thing that financing institutions typically look for, it's efficiency. So you have effectiveness, some objectives that you set for yourself as a project. And now we're looking at how efficiently are you using your own resources, potentially other resources such as partners, in-kind support, financial resources, human resources, and how efficiently are you able to deliver a particular result? So that's third thing, is efficiency. The fourth thing is, of course, innovation and uniqueness of projects. Typically, when projects come, let's say, to donors or to financing institutions, typically we get more than one. There is usually 10 or 20, so we naturally have to go through a screening process. And even though the project can be relevant, I mean, typically all projects are trying to put in some relevance, effectiveness, efficiency. But then what makes you stand out is how innovative and unique is your project. So this is something important to think about when you are designing a project, is to look around yourself and what is special that you are delivering that is maybe not on the market, it's maybe something for the future, or it's some special solution that is unlike any others there, to define your uniqueness. This is going to make you stand out from the crowd of many, let's say, other projects. Fifth thing, and a very important thing, and very often I would say left out from projects, is sustainability. And sustainability is something that is, let's say, longer term, and it's not always easy to communicate, but it should be, and you don't have to elaborate on this aspect very, very much, because obviously projects take on a life cycle of their own, and many things happen in the project, so you can't always predict from point A to point Z of your project what's going to happen, and that's understandable. Still, you should be able to project your project, so what, and how sustainable is it that other institutions can use it, that it's going to have a lasting value for the particular objective that you set for yourself. So it's a little bit of a longer-term perspective of going beyond the project and linking your project to potentially future project phases, or maybe others could take it on. So, for example, one good way of addressing sustainability is to say, you know, after we're finished project, we either go for phase 2, and this is what we will do in phase 2 to build on what we have done in phase 1, or we will give it to an implementing partner and they will do with it. But it's very important to communicate this transition. Project ends, so what? Is it, you know, many times pilot projects tend to fall into the trap of staying just a pilot. There's no scaling up. There is no adding, you know, sort of new partners to the game, mainstreaming things, bringing it to the rest of society. So these are some things that should be built on into the project. Once again, summarize this point. 5 things we look for: relevance, effectiveness, efficiency, innovations and uniqueness of a project, and then sustainability. It's a longer-term perspective. Now, going to specific projects and going, maybe the first part looked at the bigger picture. Now I would like to address some maybe smaller, let's say, or micro-level project design. So what makes actually a good project? There are some generic aspects of any project, whether it's an e-democracy project or it's an energy efficiency project or a public-private partnership project. There are some general trends, so I will cover some general aspects first, what makes a good project, and then I will go into maybe some specificities of e-democracy projects particularly, because there are some specific things. Now, the first thing you should in addition to doing those big 5, is why. There needs to be right at the very beginning of your project proposal or idea that you're trying to communicate, why. The why question. Why are you doing this? You know, many times projects go immediately into the instrument. You know, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. This is how it's going to be. You know, so they're going to go in, especially, I would say, technological or tech-oriented projects where technology is at the center. They tend to go immediately into solution. And while that's very important because that's going to be the center of your project, what is very important is even the step before why. So, you know, your technology, so what? And this why question needs to be very succinct. It's basically a problem statement. So when you're putting a proposal forward, and even when you're thinking about your project, you need to very clearly identify why you want to do it and what you want to achieve with a particular project that you are going to implement. It could be the solution to an existing problem. It could be something innovative, something very new, state-of-the-art. Obviously, in e-democracy project, this is a very common characteristics. Or it could be a process. Look, we are going to plug in, this could be, you know, your problem statement or your purpose statement. We are going to plug in already existing instrument that we have developed. You know, for 1 year we've been developing this, and we would like to demonstrate its value by plugging it into policy-making process. For example, e-consultation mechanism. Creating a platform for e-consultation, let's say in parliament or in a particular policy sector, let's say energy efficiency. How do you get all the different policy stakeholders onto a platform and doing it more effectively? Commenting, ranking, providing budgets, and so on and so on. So, you know, there are different ways of how you could state the purpose, but the why is very important. It has to be smack at the front of the proposal, you should also address immediately right there, who are your beneficiaries, who is your audience, or users. So this has to be very clear right at the beginning, because as I said at the beginning of my talk, is that, there's going to be a lot of different projects. The more you can clearly identify the value of your project, and at different levels. So, for example, many times beneficiaries, are poorly defined or are defined in limited way. Ideally, what we're looking for, especially donors, for example, is looking at beneficiaries as multiple levels. Because typically, e-democracy projects target a wider audience. Yes, it will be a specific user, for example, citizens, is obviously. It's very useful if you go to the next level, maybe what type of citizen? Is this a general society? Is anybody in Ukraine? Or is it somebody at a city level? If so, at city level, is it all demographic groups within a city? Or is it maybe also benefiting particular sections of society in a particular way? For example, women, disabled people, for example, government, so if I was to design a project, and the successful ones are the defined benefits and target audiences so first target audience and then benefits of them in a very clear way, and they're usually multi-level. So the more social value you can spell out for a project, obviously the better for your project to gain financing, yes. The second thing is then to go immediately into the what. This is where typically e-democracy projects tend to do well in. The what is your solution. You set some objectives, the why. Now, how are you going to implement the why? What concrete results or outputs will you deliver in the course of your project? For example, is it implementation of an e-democracy instrument? Or is it instrument plus a process? Is it also training? Is it marketing? Now, these activities, let's say project-based activities, need to be well defined. How you're going to achieve what you set out to achieve. So this is the what. Especially in e-democracy projects, what is very powerful, and typically the projects that I have seen myself, and there is research done on that the most successful projects in practice are those that tend to combine offline and online processes together. So technology comes in to enhance either an existing offline project, or it comes and it amplifies it or produces a completely new outcome in an offline setting. So very important for e-democracy projects, this is kind of an extra tip. How could you also spell out, online and offline components and build that into your design? The more you can show this, the better it is, that you're not forgetting, you're not just going tech heavy without forgetting the human dimension, the implementation, let's say, in practice dimension. So this is the second one. Other thing that is very important for e-democracy projects that I find that is sometimes neglected is the process, the value of a process. Again, people get so attached to solution that they leave out the process from the beginning to the end, that you actually have to get users onto your platform. People think, we build a platform or we launch a mobile application, for citizens to better scroll, let's say, city news or participate online in elections or via a mobile phone and so on. That's fantastic if you have a state-of-the-art solution. On the other hand, why should people know? How will people know about your solution? Why should they come? Why are you assuming that just because you built a solution that they will come? So this is very important also, the process of the full, let's say, life cycle of a solution, to think always about this human dimension and the process, not to mention then if we are going with the solution into the real world and plugging it into potentially, let's say, city-level government settings, say e-voting. How will that work? You will create a fantastic e-voting mechanism, transparent, participant. Now, how will the government use it? Who within the government will use it? Who will be the resource person exactly? So I will not go into detail because we have very limited time, but these are some very important things to think about that many times people, especially in e-democracy projects, tend to omit. They're so excited about the solution and wanting to launch it that the human dimension gets left out. And training is one really classic example. Solution, it's going to be launched. But who is going to be using it? Are those people who are going to be using it going to be immediately able to use it? And if not, what training will you maybe need to build in? And this is a wonderful activity that you could get financed. So once again, think about the value added of your projects that could also receive financing. Because if you give a financing institution a very good reason, a very good activity that's going to secure the value and the sustainability of your project, they're going to be very happily funding it. But it has to make sense, it has to have logic, and it has to be very well packaged with the whole solution.